Thank you very much, Laskin Corla. And I rise here this evening to vote confidence and speak in confidence of Minister Darragh O'Brien, because this is a minister who is making a real impact on government, and it's a minister who has delivered an exceptionally radical plan, Housing for All strategy, the most radical plan, in my view, in the history of the state in terms of delivering for housing, and which has delivered 28,000 new homes this year in its first year, in the very first year of the plan, the largest number of new homes since the year 2008. This motion really is no more than a political stunt, but I think it's been very valuable at the same time, because no more than the opposition motion of no confidence in the government just a few short months ago, it has shown up the vacuousness of the opposition and their sheer lack of policy. Deputy MacDonald, in her contribution, and of course they have been trumped here by People Before Profit, their future partners in a left-wing government, because it was the People Before Profit initially moved this motion. But Deputy MacDonald, in her contribution, outlined how what we need is not this motion of no confidence tonight, but actually we need a general election immediately. Presumably so that she can go into government with People Before Profit and with her left-wing friends, with Reid Smith, with Thomas Pringle, with Richard, with Paul Murphy, to deliver and solve the housing problem for us. I presume they're not going to take any of the rural independents. They never mention them at all. A coalition of the left is what they want. So we know what that would do to the economy and the great economy we have, which enables us to actually invest in housing. But somehow Deputy MacDonald thinks that that is what is going to deliver and solve the housing crisis. Well, we have another thing coming. I listened very carefully then to Deputy O'Brien, who's supposedly the housing guru for not just Sinn Féin, but this left-wing government as well. And, I mean, his contribution really, he said, our housing targets are not big enough, and the plan is failing, and it won't meet its targets. Then he went on then to give three sort of key points. It broke down to we needed real action on vacancy, ignoring, of course, what the government is doing in relation to Creek Conacha, repair and lease, for example. Second point, he said we needed action on land use, again ignoring the zoned land tax we've introduced, the increased land value sharing legislation which came before Cabinet just today, the vacant property tax we've introduced, or indeed the new planning reform bill which came before the Cabinet again today. Absolute biggest reform of housing policy, planning and development in the history of the state, brought forward by Minister O'Brien with our pioneering Attorney General Paul Gallagher, whose final week it is this week. And then third of all then he said we need real investment in social housing, ignoring of course that this year the government will deliver 9,000 social housing units, the largest ever in the history of the state. Then he finished off his great contribution. Now remember, this is the man who wrote 2 books, I think it is. I haven't read any of them, but listen to him today, you wouldn't think he'd wrote any either. He finished off his great contribution by saying, shame on you. No, and then he walked out, of course, yeah, of course. So all we've got, and listen, that was representative of all we've got from the rest of the opposition tonight. All you have done is you've defined the problems which we are working to solve in government. You offered no solutions. Deputy MacDonald, in her contribution, pointed to the importance of, says she, the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Minister for Housing and Minister for Finance. Of course, Sinn Féin have had the Minister for Housing and the Minister for Finance in Northern Ireland up until the government fell there months ago. What did that deliver? Well, last year in Northern Ireland, the average price of your average home in Northern Ireland last year was a Sinn Féin Housing Minister and Finance Minister, very important according to Deputy MacDonald. The average prices of a house in Northern Ireland last year rose by £18,000 sterling, 12% increase, with a Sinn Féin Housing Minister and a Sinn Féin Minister for Finance. Now, if you're looking to them, therefore, to deliver, well, their track record wouldn't speak very well in that regard. The key priority for me has been Micah, and Minister O'Brien has been working to deliver very hard in relation to that. We're making real impact, legislation introduced, and we will see all homes in Donegal fixed. Again, if you look at Sinn Féin in that regard, he asked them for advice in advance of the legislation, got none. They promised that they would introduce their own legislation. They still haven't published it. 6 months ago now, since we introduced the legislation, you still haven't published the legislation you promised. So again, if they're looking to you in that regard, there'll be very little delivery. I could go on, but my colleagues will take over. Thank you.